Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. In this session together, we're going to take a look at Flipgrid and how to use it, how to set it up, and the types of things we can use it for with our students. My name is Nikki Woodford. I am the coordinator of instructional and assistive technology in Sturgeon Public Schools. And without keeping you hanging, we're just going to get into it. You'll notice that there is a bit.ly link here that is to this series of slides. And if at any point you want to come back to the slide deck just to access the resources in it, it will be kept active so that you can come back at any point. Now, I want to note a couple of things in our time together. First, this is a little bit more of an intermediate session. It is not basic, ed tech tools or strategies. We're going to do a little bit, we're going to really get a good sense of how Flipgrid works. But the other reason is because we are also talking pedagogy. We are talking instructional strategies and how do we access what students know? And how can we engage them in an interesting way so that they are giving us their best work and they really are truly sharing what indeed they know as opposed to just completing a task. So like I said, it's not bare bones. It's not just a simple how-to. This is one step up. Okay? So as we think about Flipgrid, I'm going to draw a little bit of an analogy. Think of Google Docs. We use Docs for text type things. The purpose is text. For Google Slides, the traditional purpose is, a presentation style. It's a tool for presentations. Now, to be clear, there is another video on how we can be really creative with Google Slides, but for the sake of today, we'll say traditionally it is for the purpose is presentations. Google Sheets or spreadsheets, the purpose is numbers and calculations and data. And so when we think of Flipgrid, the purpose of Flipgrid is video, okay? And so it's being able to have an exchange back and forth of communication through video, all right? Now, before we get directly into how do I use this, how do I set it up, what does it look like, let me talk about the why first. In our brick and mortar, our traditional, our in-person classrooms, we have the opportunity to gather data about how our kiddos are doing and what they understand. And we rely very heavily on verbal communication, right? Asking the kids questions on, tell me about what happened in this chapter. Can someone remind me about? What is your opinion of? Can you show me a demonstration, right? Like we relied on what we visually saw. And now in this environment of distance learning, we are not able to rely as heavily on that mode of observation, communication, in-time verbal interaction. We're not able to do that in the same way. And so many are falling back onto text. And so there's now even heavier reliance on text communication. Write a paragraph about this. Type in your response here. And so as much as possible, we want to get that data back of what kids are truly thinking. Tell me about this. Can you remind me? What's your opinion? Because sometimes the text actually gets in the way. The assessment is not about a writing outcome. It's about a thinking outcome. It's about a knowledge outcome. And so really, we just need to access the knowledge. We just need to know what they know. We don't need to see the text or the written output and evaluate that as well. So just as a reference, we can, just as we would have in class, we can use video to get a sense of learning reflections. What did you learn about? What are your thoughts on? Could be a book talk. What happened in this story? Or tell me about the latest book that you read, why you liked it, what did the character do? It could be a discussion prompt. So would you rather be? Adopt the perspective of. It could be a speech. So, whether it can be either a second language or it can just be adopt the perspective of this and deliver a speech. It could be instead of a persuasive writing task, it's a persuasive debate or persuasive conversation. Convince me. It can be language learning, like I mentioned. So the student could be demonstrating their ability to speak French or Spanish. It could be explain your thinking. So here's a math or a science task that kiddos need to do. Now explain how you did it and why did you do it that way. It could be a science experiment. So demonstrate to me a science experiment. Do it for me and show me what you did and why you did it this way. It could be a STEAM demonstration. So any number of these are ways to interact with video in ways that reflect what we would have done in the classroom through observation and verbal communication. And we're not then having to rely on a text form in order to communicate back and forth. So in the live webinar, this would have been an opportunity for teachers to see exactly what a topic looks like in Flipgrid. And so I'll show you real quick. If I click on this link here, it takes me to what a student view would look like for a topic. And now it's called a pivot reflection. And the prompt is here. So if I wanted to, I could watch this video here. But then the question is, what is the most profound thing you have learned in this shift to online teaching and learning? Now, if I wanted to, I could ask you to write a paragraph for me, but I'm not. And instead, what you're going to do is you're going to click on the moderate on the plus button here to create a video. And so I would go ahead and put in my name. And it's now going to allow me to record a video. Okay. Now it tells me if I've got 2 minutes, there are some additional features. I can add a board, I can add some drawing, I can manipulate if I like, but I would go ahead and press record. So in the live webinar, the participants did just that. And now what I'm going to show you is what we do with these. Okay, so how do we make a topic? How do we make a grid and a topic, and what are the settings that we want to be mindful of? So if you go into the slides, you will see that this Flipgrid icon here will take you to the Flipgrid website. And I'm just going to wait for it to load. Now the nice thing about Flipgrid is that it also accesses a login where you can connect your G Suite account. So if I click on Educator Login, now when you set it up for the very first time, you can use your G Suite account to connect it. I've already logged in today, so it's just recognizing that it's me and it's going to allow me in. Now in Flipgrid, let's just be clear about some of the terminology because it took me a moment to wrap my head around it, okay? Now, my activity, think of my activity kind of like the stream in Classroom. Here are the things that have been going on, just latest updates. My grids, here's where I'm at, here's where I will be most of the time. Think of classwork in Classroom, so it's kind of where you create, where you monitor, things like that. Mixtapes is a place where you can create. So if at any point you have all of these video responses and all of this video content, and at any point you can actually put it together, much like you would have made a mixtape in the past. Grid Pals is the community on Flipgrid. And then the Disco Library we will come back to, but it's just a bunch of resources, okay? Now, if you think in Flipgrid, the terminology grid refers to a group and who has access, okay? So I think the way that I think about it is kind of like it's like a class in Google Classroom, okay? It is where the content is posted and there are people that have access to this particular space, all right? So I have 2 grids, 2 groups here. Now you can make this quite granular if you like, or you can make the grids quite broad. So in other words, I could have, if it's primary, I might have a grid for my grade 2 class. But if I am junior high or high school, I might have a grid for my LA9 group. of kids. And then I might have another grid for my different group of LA9, okay? But you can get quite granular if you wanted to break it down by almost unit. If you know you're going to use Flipgrid and rely on it heavily, you could break it down by unit. And so it could be, English 20-1, and here's the poetry grid. Here's the film grid. Here's the novel grid. So you could break it down and be a little bit more granular, okay? But now I'm gonna go ahead and create a new grid. So I'm gonna add a new grid. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say that this is the social 8, and it's team awesome. And now because it's video, this is video, so we need to be mindful of privacy and identity. And so we want to keep this to be a private space. And so the way that we're going to do that is by selecting school email, and then we identify who has access to this grid and who doesn't. And I'm going to go click next. And so I'm going to go in and identify the domain of the accounts. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I could take this link, because this link is for the entire grid. It doesn't matter what topics I post in it, it's access to this whole grid, much like there is a code for an entire Google class. Now, if I wanted, I could post I could copy this, or I could push it to Google Classroom and just say, here's the link to the whole grid. I could do it that way. But I might find, just to get started, that I'm going to post the individual topic links to an assignment to Google Classroom as I use it. But that is up to you. So now I'm going to go to my grid. And now I can kind of do some editing here if I want. I can add a co-pilot. I can add a teacher. I can duplicate this grid. So I can do some more editing there. So there are some things that I can do here. Okay, and then below, here's where we start to add the topics. Another way to think about the topics is an activity, a prompt, an assignment, a task. Okay, so while it says topic, we just kind of want to use that vocabulary. It's a prompt or an assignment. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. There's one here which I could view, but I'm not going to use it. And I'm going to click add a new topic. And here's where I can put in some details. So this might be, would you rather? Here I can add some additional instructions. So we are studying Lord of the Flies in English 20-1. And at this point in the novel, we have a good sense of understanding around the characters of Simon, Piggy, Ralph, and Jack. So you now need to provide a response as to who you would rather be. Would you rather be Jack, Piggy, Ralph, or Simon? Okay. Now, I have some additional options below. I'm going to select, let's move this out of the way. I can select recording time. So I can give them as minimal as 15 seconds and up to 10 minutes, keeping in mind that the time that you select is an indicator for the student the type of response that is required. If you are only requiring a 30-second to minute response, then don't select 10 minutes. I guarantee one kid will use it. But if you were expecting something that's more thoughtful, that's got more detail around it, then don't just give them 30 seconds. Okay, so give some thought. This case, I might say that they have 2 minutes. And particularly for the first couple of times of using Flipgrid, but I would say as a teacher, your default is that you want the videos moderated. Again, we want to ensure that the content is appropriate and that all students feel comfortable on this platform, particularly because they have an opportunity to see each other's responses. Okay, so we're going to say that they are moderated and that they are hidden. The only person that can see them after the student has submitted them is the teacher. Now, I can add some additional prompts. I could add a picture of the 4 characters from the movie. I could add, if there's a video on YouTube, I could pull that in. I could add an emoji, like emoticon. So I could record my own video, and that's actually really good universal design for learning practice, that we're not only giving the instructions in a text form, but we're also giving it in another form as well. So you could record a video saying, here are the instructions, here's some things I want you to be mindful of. Okay, and now we're going to click on more options. Don't forget about this part. There's some good things in here. You can add a tip if you think the kids will need it. And you can also allow for students to add attachments. So for example, if you want them to produce a presentation for you, then you may actually want them to attach the slide URL that they've created. So you want to give them that. My topic status for this is going to be active, but I can always go back and change it. But here's some things to pay attention to. Students can add filters, stickers, drawings, and text to their videos and selfies. I have found that our kiddos get really distracted by personalizing. And while I am okay with personalization, the challenge is that they get so focused on personalization and they actually forget the content. So think anytime you ask them to create a PowerPoint, they got so focused on transitions and like word art that they lost focus on the content. And so you can decide and say that maybe none. You don't get to apply filters, stickers, drawings, or text to anything. Or you could do selfies and videos. So that is up to you. I might say that for selfies only. The video title, sure. Video count, I tend to turn this off. Again, I want the students to feel comfortable that they can share their content to create, and not that the goal is ultimately the outcome. The goal is not to entertain and see how many likes we can get. We're not going to feed into, have their identities feed into the number of likes. And so I'm just going to turn that feature off. And in fact, Instagram, like a couple of the social networking, they are taking cues from that as well. So we're going to turn that off. Sticky notes, yes, we're going to allow kiddos to put sticky notes in because it can be a good planning tool. Attachment links, yep. And again, I'm going to turn this one off. Allow students to like other student videos. We're going to turn that off. Okay. Student to student replies, sure, we'll allow that. All right. Now, feedback. Did you know that you could have a rubric or criteria that you want to evaluate, and you can just customize that and put that right within Flipgrid? So as I think about maybe the rubric that's used at the high school level, if I'm not mistaken, ideas and impressions is one category, and then I can add one more category of matters of correctness or choice or writing, something like that, writing style. But I can pop those right in there, the criteria, what this, what's it out of, and go from there. And so they get their feedback really quite immediately in there. So now that I've made all these customizations, I'm going to create the topic. And perfect. Now, remember when I said you can either provide the link to the whole grid or provide the link just to this one assignment? Then here's what I would take and push this into Google Classroom. And I can either copy this and then go into Classroom and create the assignment from there, or I just click on Share to Google Classroom, and it's going to open a window where I can do that right here. And so it's loading my class because it's connected to my G Suite account. I'm going to pick Mrs. Woodford's classroom. I want this to create an assignment, and then I'm going to click go. And then I can add those additional pieces in, and then once I've got it all set, I will click assign. Okay? Now, if you know that the topic you are creating, you want people from outside of the EDU domain to be able to have access to, in other words, you want them to be able to provide some sort of video response, then you can click on Add Topic Guests, turn this on, and then it would give you the link that you could then share. Okay? So that option is there. The other thing I want you to know is that this is a a Microsoft application, and one of the accessibility features in Microsoft is called this immersive reader. So this is ultimately a text-to-speech button, and you'll notice it on the teacher side and the student side, so that if anybody needs the text read, then they can click on that and it'll read those instructions. Okay, now I'm just going to go back here just so I can see. And now here's that topic, would you rather? Okay. Now, if I wanted to view it as a student, then I don't have to have a student access. I don't have to have student credentials in order to view it like a student. I would just click on view as a student, click on my account to access it. And then it'll give me the student view of what this looks like, which is super helpful. So here's the grid, Social 8 team, awesome. Here's the prompt, I can click on it. And then I would click on the green button in order to create a response. Now, as I mentioned, if I allowed them stickies, or stickers or filters, they would appear down here. There is an indication of how much time is there. And then if kiddos want to use those sticky notes for planning, so maybe here's the prompt, would you rather? Then I might use this for planning and say, I want to be Piggy, and here are the reasons that I want to talk about. So it's nice because then they don't have to rely on a piece of paper and be looking down and up. There are just some tools around them on the screen that they can refer to, and then their eye contact is on the screen and not just a relying on down. Okay, so then they would click record, and it's a really simple interface. And when they're done, then they can preview it, they can delete it, and they can do it again if they want. Now, after you have seen them, I'm just going to pop back into the teacher side, and I'm going to go to a grid where I know I have a response already. So I'm going to go to my grids. I'm going to go to this one here, and I can see that I've got, some responses here. I got an email for every single one that was submitted. And then I can also see here is a response that, here's one that I haven't looked at. And this is one that I want to take a peek at. So here's one, I see it's hidden. In other words, I haven't previewed it yet. I haven't released it yet. And so I would go ahead and take a look, and then I can provide some feedback. So based on the rubric I might use, then I can indicate the level of achievement here. I can provide some written feedback here in the comments. I can also provide video feedback. I could record my own video feedback. And then I would go into edit. After I have seen it, I can take a peek, and then I can say, yep, this is totally appropriate, and I think students would benefit from seeing this, and I can change this to active. Okay. I can also download, I can do some different things with the videos that have been created. All right. So in a nutshell, that is how we create. That is how we adjust the settings, and then we review the responses. Now, before we go entirely, I want to just point you to the Disco library. Again, I don't come up with these terms. But you will see across the top, there's my activity, my grids, mixtapes, and then there's the Disco library. If you're not sure where to start, then there are a number of resources that are already created that you can get some ideas on. So there are featured playlists, so to speak, or topics that you could access, but there's also additional ones that you can filter down to. So maybe you want something that is related to math, and you want something focused on middle school, then there are a number of topics already created that you could take a peek at and reference and use. Okay. So But as you start to take a look back, you can see, oh yeah, the kids totally could do chapter questions through Flipgrid, because we would have done that through a conversation or a discussion anyway. They could give me examples of their speaking in French. They could give me an adopt a perspective or a source analysis or a visual analysis, or like there are a number of things that the kids can do, especially now that from the student side, when they create their video, there is the option to share their screen. So the screen is what's seen, and not just the webcam. Okay, so there's a number of different strategies that you can use this for, and it doesn't have to rely on text. Okay, so on that note, before I let you go, I just want to point you in a couple of directions. One, our lovely colleagues out of Edmonton Catholic have created a number of resources on Flipgrid. And so even just as I was learning from myself, I referenced my colleagues there, just to make sure I understood how to use it well. And so there are some, if you go to the link here in this set of slides, it will take you to the MTech team's website, and just under remote learning, you will see that there is a site to support Flipgrid. You will also notice that we continue to add these Lunch and Learn videos and other tutorials to the Sturgeon Public Schools Learning Together YouTube channel. And so content is added to there regularly. And you can access these videos and take a peek at them at a time that suits you. And then the other thing, just for quick access, there's been a little bit of feedback that it's just really hard to find these videos, Nikki. So what we've done is on the continuing learning website created by the Ed Services team, you'll notice that under the teachers heading, there is just a sub-page called Virtual PD. And if you click on there, you will see that now all of the Lunch and Learn recordings with the slides and any additional tutorial videos, which are often shorter, have been posted here just for really quick access as we wait for this to load, because I'm working my computer hard. Okay, so I will leave you with those resources. Now, certainly if you have any questions along the way, you want to talk about what could prompts be? How could I set this up? Nikki, can we try one together? The answer is yes. Just give me a shout, send me an email, and I'm happy to provide support as we start to just figure out how do we use these things well? How do we make sure we can access what the kids know in an efficient but in an authentic way? So with that, I will let you go. I hope you have a really great day, and thank you for joining me as we continue to learn together. Take care.